All right. Okay, so in module 1, or if you think of it maybe as chapter 1, the very basic concepts of supply chain. Now, you have experience in supply chain, so these might sound familiar to you. But then again, it's always good to have them as a refresher or to build upon that knowledge and learn exactly what those terms are within the industry or what those terms are academically. Okay, so that's the goal here. Now we have unit 1. In unit 1, we have supply chain basics.
Okay.
All right, so we'll start with that. Now, I always like to ask the students, what do you think a supply chain means, right? So let me take the slide back. Let me ask you, Brenda, what is a supply chain? In your own words, describe to me what is a supply chain, if you can.
I would say it's where you actually be able for on demand supply some type of product or material that someone needs. Is the logistics of actually being able to locate the item all the way until you get it to the customer.
Yes, very good. So you do use some terms within the industry, you say logistics, and somebody that's not within this industry, it might say, okay, but what is logistics, right? You and me, we know, or we've heard it, or we've read about it before, so we know what that is. But the actual description, as it is with the Supply Chain Management Council, they describe this as supply chain as a network of people, processes, resources, and technology. That's what happens within this network. Now, the name might be a little confusing, right? Because when we see supply chain, we think of a chain, right? A link that connects the chain, that connects to something else, that holds to something else. There's something that connects at the beginning and then it finishes at the end of the chain.
Yes.
That's just the name of a supply chain. We think of a supply chain more as a network, as a matrix, right? That there's so many things that happen all at once. And in this network, we have what? People, which can be companies or individuals. We have processes, meaning activities or functions. We have resources, which can be materials. It could be money. It could be data. And we have the technology, which combines that data and how we communicate with one another. Now, what do all these things do? Well, they're involved in moving and processing those resources and services, because there could be, we think of supply chain, we think of only products, but some service industries also have supply chains within their businesses. So they're involved in moving and processing the resources and services from the raw material stage all the way down to the main user.
Yes.
So basically a little bit of what you said, right? It's because of the products and getting the materials from where they're being made or they're being sourced to ultimately who is going to use them. That's what a supply chain is. So by definition, it is important that we learn the actual definition of it, because if we're trying to explain this to somebody else, they're going to be able to understand it better if we explained it this way. We say a supply chain is a network, and this network has people, processes, resources, and technology. These are the 4 things. And you're going to see these 4 things being repeated over and over as we move along. Okay. And what are they involved with, or what do? They process those resources and some services from getting things from a raw material stage to the actual end user, not a customer, because they're not the same thing. A customer and a user, they're not the same thing. And we're going to learn that in an upcoming unit. Okay. Now, if you think about it, right, supply chains have been around for a while, ever since somebody decided to barter something with something else, right? Because we can't, even going back to ancient times, we can't all make all the things we need.
No.
So as we started to need more and more things and consume more and more items and goods, we needed to do what? Trade.
Right.
So the beginning of supply chains really is the basis of trade.
Trading, yes.
Local trade, domestic trade, or even going to international trade, which is what we do now, right? It's not just domestically, it's actually international and global trade. So they've been around for a while. They've been around since the Silk Trade Road, when we had to exchange spices and goods. They've been around with the military. If you have experience in the military, that's where, when we had wars to go back and forth, we needed to do what? take soldiers back and forth, the resources that the soldiers would need back and forth. That's also a type of supply chain. And even coming to today, where supply chains really consist of what? The global networks that we're familiar with, right? Sourcing products from all the way from China, Indonesia, Brazil, whatever products you're sourcing from or materials, that becomes part of your company's or your business supply chain. Okay. Good. Any questions about this? Because this builds everything else, right?
Yes.
Okay. Questions, comments, concerns?
No, I understand. So basically, the raw materials to a complete until you actually get it to the product that they need. So it's like a working in progress. So you're working, so it comes to raw material and then you work it into a work in progress to actually get it to the finished product.
Yes, and that's also the concept of inventory and the different types of inventory we have. We have raw materials, we have work in process, like you said, or progress, and then we have the finished goods, right? Okay. So those are the parts of what we have to manufacture or create if we're selling something. Okay. Now, things have to happen before that, right? And things have to happen after that. Those are what connects our supply chain networks. Yes. Okay? So very good. So yes. Now, supply chains, now we know what they are. Now we need to know what are the functions within supply chain. And now this is putting more terminology or concepts that are more strictly for supply chains. Okay. So a supply chain, as we know, is a network, but it is also a network of the individual functions within an organization that begins with the development of a strategic plan. And it ends with the delivery of the product or the service, right? So supply chains, they're what? The network. And we have these people, these resources, right? The technology that move back and forth. And we're going to talk about that movement. The goal there is to do what? Process or transform things from a raw material stage to the actual end user. Okay. Supply chain functions, which we'll later talk about as supply chain management functions, it's what your company or your organization is involved with, what functions they have to do to develop a plan that ends when the customer or the end user gets their product or service. Okay. So supply chains, the big picture, functions, all the little activities that need to take place. All the little processes or functions, as we call them, that have to take place for that supply chain to work. Okay. Now, within these functions or within supply chain, we have the functions of demand planning, supply management and procurement, inventory management, warehouse operations, manufacturing and service operations, transportation operations, and customer service operations. Now, when you notice that these are the modules we cover, right? Yes. But that's because these are the functions or the activities that need to take place within supply chain. Okay, good. Any questions? No. All right, so let's move forward. Now, why should we care? Why is this important, right? Why do we need to care as business people or people that function within a particular economy, right? Why do we care? Because supply chain is directly linked to an organization's health, right? For them to be able to manufacture a product, for a company to be able to offer a service, they have to do it with planning these things, right? If we don't do it, that affects the company, that affects the organization. Now, supply chain has become very popular because we saw the pandemic happen, right? And we saw the shortages of all these things. People started to say, what happened to my toilet paper? What happened to toothpaste? What happened to all the sanitizers, right? We started to see a direct connection to people and the emotional connection they had to those goods because of the necessities we saw from the pandemic, right? But then what ends up also happening is that we start to see more people trying to learn what supply chain is and why it is so important. It's not a new concept. It's not a new business concept. This has been around for a while, right? This we know. So it's not something new. But what it is that it's created more attention from the media, more attention from the public as far as finding out what went wrong when things go wrong. Okay. So now it is important also to know within an organization, because we need to know, for example, what inventory will be required to manufacture a good. When is it going to be needed? Who will be your suppliers? Who's going to be, who's going to sell it to us?
Yes.
What kind of demand is expected? How will the product move from one point to another point? And where will the product be stored? So these are just some of the questions, right? We can get into thousands of questions that happen within supply chains, but these are some of the questions we need to think about as a business. Because if we don't, what happens? If you fail to plan, you plan to fail, right?
Yes.
That should be the slogan of supply chains everywhere.
Yes.
If you don't plan, you're going to fail, especially in an environment now where it's so volatile and so many things can go wrong, right? It's not the expected flow of things anymore. Before the pandemic, everybody had sort of an expectation of what to
but not anymore.
Not anymore, right? Markets go up, they go down. Things happen so fast. Inflation is rising, gas prices are up, and they're down. There's so many things that you might not expect to affect businesses and their supply chains, but it does. Yeah. So if we need to know these things ahead of time and plan for them, that's the best kind of strategy to have. And that's important for a company.